It was a quiet evening when Liam first noticed something strange. He had just returned home from work and was looking forward to a peaceful night. The sky was dimming, the stars beginning to appear, and everything around him seemed calm. But as Liam stepped out of his car, he saw something unusual, a soft glow coming from the forest near his house. Curious, he walked toward the trees. His footsteps were careful, the ground beneath him soft from recent rain. The glow was getting brighter, pulsing gently, almost as if it was calling to him. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should just turn back. But something about it felt different, something that made him feel both nervous and excited at the same time. As he approached the edge of the woods, he saw her, a figure, barely visible in the light, standing just a few feet away. She was tall, dressed in what looked like shimmering fabric that seemed to change colors in the light. Her hair was long, flowing, and glowed faintly, like strands of silver light. Liam stood frozen, unsure of what to do. "Are you lost?" he finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't respond at first. She just stared at him, her eyes reflecting the same strange glow that surrounded her. For a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. Liam's heart was racing, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. There was something both beautiful and terrifying about her presence. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. The soft hum of her energy seemed to fill the air, making the night feel alive in a way Liam had never experienced before. "I am not lost," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I need your help." Liam blinked, unsure of what to make of her words. "Help? What kind of help?" She paused, as if considering her next words carefully. "I have no place to go. I need sanctuary." Liam's mind raced. What was happening? Was this some kind of prank, or was she really? He didn't have time to finish the thought. He simply nodded, his curiosity taking over. "You can come inside," he said, motioning toward his house. "But you need to tell me who you are." The woman didn't say anything, but she followed him silently, stepping lightly, as though floating just above the ground. Liam turned back to glance at her, but when he did, she was no longer just a stranger in the woods. She was something far more mysterious than he could have imagined. The following morning, the sun had barely risen, casting a soft, golden glow over the landscape. But inside the small cabin, all was silent except for the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Ethan had never been one to wake up early, but that day, something felt different. He had a strange sense that the world around him was shifting, though he couldn't quite place why. As he stretched and yawned, he noticed a small, delicate figure standing outside the cabin window. At first, he thought it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but as he blinked, he realized it wasn't. There, in the clearing just beyond the door, was an alien woman. Her skin shimmered under the sunlight, with shades of blue and green that seemed to change as she moved. She was tall, with long flowing hair that seemed to float in the air like it had a life of its own. Her eyes were large and bright, shining with an unspoken intelligence, and her expression was one of both curiosity and caution. Ethan froze. He wasn't sure if he should be afraid, fascinated, or both. His mind raced with questions. How had she gotten here? Why was she standing in his backyard? Without thinking, he opened the door. The hinges creaked loudly, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, there was only silence between them. "Hello," Ethan finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien woman tilted her head slightly, as if she was studying him. "You're human." Her voice was melodic, soft, yet it carried an undeniable strength. "Yes," Ethan replied, still unsure of what was happening. I didn't expect to see anyone, especially not someone like you." The alien woman smiled slightly, though it seemed more out of curiosity than friendliness. "I am not what you think," she said. "I did not come to harm you." Her words did little to ease Ethan's nerves, but he couldn't help feeling a strange pull toward her. There was something about her that was different. Her presence was both calming and unnerving, a mix of warmth and mystery. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, taking a cautious step forward. "I am Lyra," she replied. "I come from a distant place, a world far from here." Ethan's heart raced. Lyra. An alien standing in front of him, claiming to come from another world. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right there in front of him. "Why are you here?" he asked, his curiosity beginning to outweigh his fear. Lyra's eyes glimmered as she took a deep breath, her gaze momentarily drifting toward the horizon. "I need your help," she said quietly, "and it is something only you can give me." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what kind of help she needed, but the look in her eyes told him that whatever it was going to change everything. As the days passed, Viera's condition grew more stable, but she was still weak. The human, whom she had only known as Jack, was doing everything he could to help her heal. She had never expected such kindness from someone who was so different from her own kind. Viera, who had once feared the humans, found herself growing curious about Jack and his world. One day, as she lay resting on the couch, Jack entered the room with a tray of food. It was simple, but there was something about the way he carefully placed it on the table next to her that made Viera's heart stir. She had been struggling to regain her strength, but it was clear to her now that the human was not like the others she had encountered. He had no interest in using her for his own gain. He only wanted to help. "Thank you," Viera said softly, looking up at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Why are you helping me?" Jack paused, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth she hadn't expected. "Because it's the right thing to do. No one should suffer alone, especially not someone who's been through what you have." Viera didn't know how to respond. She had never known kindness from anyone before. The memories of her home planet, where the stronger preyed on the weaker, flooded her mind. She had always been taught that survival meant taking what you could from others, but Jack's actions were different. He was showing her something entirely new, something that made her question everything she had ever known. "You don't have to thank me," Jack continued, his voice gentle. It's just what people do when they care." Her heart skipped a beat. Care. The word felt strange, foreign even. Could this human truly care for her? A being so different from him, a stranger from another world. Viera's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden wave of dizziness. She placed her hand on her forehead, trying to steady herself. Jack noticed immediately and rushed to her side, concern in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hand hovering near her arm, unsure whether to touch her or not. She nodded slowly, closing her eyes. "I'm fine, just a little tired." The exhaustion of her journey had taken a toll on her body, and while her wounds were healing, her mind was still struggling to process everything. She had never experienced such care before, and it was making her feel things she didn't know how to deal with. Jack smiled softly, relieved that she was okay. He sat beside her, quietly waiting for her to recover. The silence between them was peaceful, but it was also filled with unspoken questions. Viera could sense it. Jack wanted to understand her, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to let him. How could she explain the fear and the anger that had defined her existence up until now? In that moment, Viera realized that this human was offering her something more than just physical care. He was offering her a chance at something different, something that felt foreign but deeply comforting. She glanced at him, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty in her eyes. "Jack," she whispered, "what do you want from me?" He simply smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "Nothing," he replied. "I just want you to be okay." Viera didn't have the words to express what she was feeling, but in that moment, something shifted inside her. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, something she had never thought possible. As the day went on, the human, Alex, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had always been curious, but this was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. The alien girl, Mira, had said very little, keeping to herself as she adjusted to her new surroundings. She was quiet, withdrawn, and always seemed to be lost in thought. Yet there was something about her that intrigued him, something deep in her eyes that spoke of pain and longing. Alex tried to make conversation, asking her questions about her world, her people, but each time she would only give vague answers, as if holding something back. It frustrated him, but he couldn't help but feel a strange pull to her. It was as if she was a puzzle, and he was determined to figure her out. As night approached, the air around them seemed to grow heavy, thick with unspoken words. Mira sat near the window, staring out into the dark sky, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the stars. Alex watched her from a distance, sensing the unease radiating from her. Finally, he decided to break the silence. "Mira," he called gently, his voice soft but steady. "What happened to you? Why are you so distant?" Mira stiffened at the sound of his voice, but didn't turn to look at him. She seemed to struggle with her words, as if deciding whether to tell him the truth or not. For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I can't tell you everything," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I'll try to explain." Alex leaned forward, his curiosity growing. "You don't have to tell me everything, Mira. Just tell me what's going on." She hesitated for a long time, and then slowly, as if the weight of her words was too much to bear, she spoke. "My people," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "We were at war, a war so terrible it destroyed everything. Our home, our family, our future, all of it was taken from us." Her eyes filled with sorrow, and Alex felt a pang of sympathy for her. I escaped, but they're still out there, still hunting me." Alex didn't know what to say. He was shocked by the weight of her words. An alien girl, running from a war, hiding in a strange world. He couldn't imagine what that must be like, what it must have taken for her to leave everything behind. But one thing was clear. Mira was in danger, and Alex wasn't going to let her face it alone. "I won't let them hurt you, Mira," Alex promised, his voice firm with determination. Mira finally looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. She didn't find any. And for the first time, a small, hopeful smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope after all. A few days passed, and life started to feel different for the human and the alien girl. The fear and confusion that had once clouded their relationship had begun to clear, replaced by something more comforting, something they had both longed for but didn't know how to express. They began to understand each other more deeply than before. The alien girl, whose name was Kayla, had started to open up more. She was no longer just the mysterious creature from another world. She had become more than that, someone who shared laughter, fear, and stories with the human. In return, he had shown Kayla kindness, something she had never expected from a human. She had always been wary, seeing humans as selfish and cruel, but he had changed her perspective. One morning, as they sat outside enjoying a quiet breakfast, Kayla looked at him with a new sense of curiosity. "You're different," she said softly. "Why do you help me so much?" The human smiled, a little unsure of how to explain it. I believe everyone deserves kindness, even if you're from another world." Kayla blinked in surprise. She had never met anyone who thought like that. But as she gazed into his eyes, she felt a warmth spreading inside her chest, something she couldn't explain. She had been running from her past, hiding from her feelings, but now, for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. They had grown so close in such a short amount of time. Kayla found herself trusting him more and more. The human never pushed her to speak about her past, and she appreciated that. He simply listened, respected her silence, and always made her feel welcome. One afternoon, while they were walking through the woods near the house, Kayla paused, her hand on the trunk of a large tree. She glanced over at him, and then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do now. My world, it's gone, and I can't go back. The human stopped walking, his heart heavy with empathy. Then, we'll figure it out together. You're not alone. She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. You're sure? He nodded firmly, his gaze never leaving hers. Yes, you have me now. We'll make a new life, whatever that means. The words were simple, but to Kayla, they felt like a promise that she could finally have hope again. For so long, she had been lost, not knowing where she belonged. But now, with him by her side, she could see the possibility of something new. The two of them continued their walk, the silence between them no longer awkward. It felt comfortable, a shared understanding growing between them. They were two people from different worlds, but in that moment, they were united by something stronger than the universe that had separated them. And as the sun began to set, casting golden light over the trees, Kayla knew that no matter what the future held, she had found a place to call home. As the days passed, the bond between Zara and Julian grew stronger. They spent time together exploring the alien world, learning about its history and secrets. Zara had been more open with him, sharing her thoughts and feelings. She had never met anyone like Julian, someone who didn't fear her alien nature and treated her with kindness. One evening, they sat by the shimmering river, the stars above them reflecting in the water. Zara looked at Julian, a sense of peace settling over her. She had always felt alone in the vastness of space, but now, with him, she didn't feel so isolated. I never imagined I'd find someone like you, Zara said quietly, her voice soft like the wind. You make me feel normal. Julian smiled, his eyes full of understanding. I don't care that you're from another world, Zara. You're just like me, looking for a place to belong. Zara's heart skipped a beat. She had never let anyone in like this before. She had been afraid of rejection, of being seen as a monster, but Julian saw her as a person, not as a strange alien being. As they sat in comfortable silence, Zara's thoughts wandered. She knew her time with Julian was limited. There was a part of her that feared what might happen when the war ended, when she had to return to her people. But for now, she chose to live in the moment. The future was uncertain, but the present was beautiful. Julian leaned closer, his hand brushing against hers. The simple touch sent a spark of warmth through her. She looked up at him, finding that her feelings for him were growing deeper every day. Her heart ached at the thought of what might come next, but she pushed it away. Right now, she was here, with him, and that was all that mattered. You've shown me so much, Julian, Zara said, her voice a bit shaky. I don't want this to end. He turned to face her, his gaze intense but gentle. It doesn't have to end, Zara. We can figure this out together. Zara's heart fluttered at his words. She had never expected someone like him to care for her so deeply. He had been her rock, her support in the chaos of war, and now she realized that perhaps for the first time, she wasn't alone. She had found a place where she belonged. The stars above them twinkled like a promise, bright, infinite, and full of possibilities. They didn't know what the future would bring, but as long as they were together, they were ready to face it. The human stood silently in front of the alien woman, unsure of what to say. She had been so calm and collected throughout everything, but now her voice was shaky, a sign of her inner turmoil. He could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the wind. I've done things I can't take back. The human's heart softened. He had seen her at her best and worst, yet he couldn't bring himself to be angry with her. She was not a monster, just someone who had been forced into situations she couldn't control. He stepped closer, his presence a silent comfort. You don't have to fix everything alone, he said gently. I'm here. We'll figure this out together. Her eyes lifted to meet his, the tears threatening to spill, but never falling. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop, as if the weight of their shared moment hung between them, too heavy to break. I don't deserve this, she whispered, almost to herself. You shouldn't have to help me." The human didn't hesitate. He reached out, touching her hand softly. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "You deserve more than you think," he replied, his voice steady and filled with warmth. "Don't ever think that you're not worth fighting for. We all have our battles, but you don't have to fight yours alone anymore." She looked at him in surprise, as if she hadn't expected to hear those words. The thought of someone, anyone, being willing to stand by her side seemed impossible to her for so long. Yet here he was, a human who didn't look at her with fear or judgment. "You're not afraid?" she asked, her voice almost trembling with disbelief. "Fear is normal," he said with a small smile. "But courage is choosing to face it anyway. And right now, I'm choosing to face it with you." The alien woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. His words were simple, but they had the power to change everything. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope stirring within her, a small but powerful thing that she hadn't known was still possible. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, a new resolve entering her voice. "Together, we can face whatever comes next." The human smiled, a sense of calm settling between them. They weren't alone anymore. In the quiet of the moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. For the first time, they were both free from their pasts, ready to face the future side by side. After the daring rescue and their escape from the clutches of the alien invaders, things began to change for him. The journey that had started with confusion and fear was now filled with strange but beautiful moments. Though it had been a struggle to keep the alien woman safe, something had changed between them. He had become her protector, and she, in turn, had slowly begun to trust him more and more. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the alien woman, still hesitant, glanced at him from time to time. She had been through so much. Her life had been a mix of fear, survival, and uncertainty. Yet now, in this small, peaceful moment, she felt something she hadn't expected. "You know," she spoke softly, her voice trembling slightly, "I never thought I would be in this position. I thought I'd be alone forever." She paused, her eyes distant as she reflected on the many hardships of her life. "But you're here." He looked at her, unsure of what to say at first. There had been so many moments where he thought they might not make it out alive. But now, with the light of the fire dancing in her eyes, he realized how much they had both changed. "I told you I'd help you," he said quietly, his voice steady. "And I meant it." She smiled at him, a warm, grateful smile that reached her eyes. It was the first time she had smiled like that since their adventure began. For a moment, it felt like everything else. The chaos, the danger, the battles, had faded away. It was just the two of them, sharing a simple but profound connection. She leaned in closer, her voice almost a whisper. "Thank you for everything. I never thought I'd find someone like you." There it was, a simple gesture, a simple word, but it carried more weight than anything else she had said before. And in that moment, he realized that he, too, had found something precious, something he never thought he would find. But as they stared at each other, the stars above them shining brightly, a sense of peace began to settle in. They were not alone anymore, despite everything that had happened. The struggles, the dangers, they had found each other, and for that, they would always be grateful. The future was still uncertain, filled with many unknowns, but as they sat there, side by side, both of them knew one thing for sure: they would face whatever came next together. And that was enough. The human soldier stood there, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The battle was over, and with it, his fate had changed completely. He had won a victory, but it wasn't just any victory. It had come with a price. In the heart of the alien war zone, he found himself suddenly in the middle of a new and bewildering situation. Surrounded by the stunning alien women, each more beautiful and intriguing than the last, he didn't know what to make of his new role. What had he gotten himself into? These women had once been slaves in the hands of the enemies he had fought against. Now, by some strange twist of fate, they were his. As the first rays of the morning sun filtered through the cracked walls of the ruined spaceship, the soldier could feel the weight of their eyes on him. They were silent, watching him with curiosity, confusion, and something else, something more uncertain. He could see the fear in their eyes too, despite their beauty and grace. The soldier didn't know much about the alien culture, but one thing was clear: these women had never been free before. They had been forced into service, caught in the brutal crossfire of a galactic war that seemed endless. Now they were here, under his care, but he wasn't sure how to treat them. They were survivors, yes, but they were also broken in their own way. One of them, a woman with bright purple skin and silver tattoos etched into her arms, stepped forward cautiously. She met his gaze, her eyes glowing faintly. "You will protect us?" she asked in a voice that was both soft and firm. It wasn't a question as much as it was a challenge. The soldier swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. He had faced enemy armies, fought through fire and blood. But this was something different. He wasn't sure if he was capable of protecting them, especially from the darkness of their pasts. "I'll try," he said, his voice low but sincere. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. The galaxy they were in was full of enemies, and war had left its scars on all of them. But he had something the others didn't: hope. In that moment, he made a promise to himself. He didn't just want to protect them. He wanted to give them something they hadn't had before: freedom. A chance to rebuild their lives and find peace, no matter what it took. He wasn't alone in this war anymore. Now he had allies, and he would fight for them just as hard as he had fought for his own survival. But the question remained: could he truly lead them to a better future, or would the weight of the past drag them all down? As the day stretched on, the soldier found himself faced with an uncertain future. But one thing was clear: he wasn't going to face it alone. Together, they would have to navigate this new life, full of challenges and dangers. As the days passed, Jack's life continued with the same quiet pace he had known before. But now, every corner of his home carried memories of the alien woman who had once shared his life. Her laughter, her presence, and the shock of her sudden disappearance. He had wondered many times if he would ever understand the reasons behind her departure, or if the answers would remain hidden forever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field outside his house, a figure appeared at the gate. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He recognized her instantly: Anya, the alien woman who had become so much more than a mystery. She stood there, tall and graceful, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Jack," Anya's voice was soft but steady. "I never meant for it to be like this." Jack stood frozen, his mind racing. Was this real? Had he been dreaming all along? But as Anya stepped closer, her features more familiar than ever, Jack knew he wasn't imagining it. She was here, in front of him, and the truth was finally about to be revealed. "I have to explain," she continued. "What I told you before was a lie. Not all of it, but enough of it to keep you in the dark." Jack didn't know what to say. The questions that had burned in his mind for so long now swirled around him like a whirlwind. He had thought she left because of something he had done, or worse, something he hadn't done. But now, as she stood there, regret clear in her eyes, he felt his anger fade. He had missed her, and maybe, just maybe, the answers he had been waiting for would finally come. "I was sent here for a purpose," Anya explained. "Not just to find you, but to help you. You've been part of something bigger, Jack. I couldn't tell you, not at first. You would never have believed me." Jack's pulse quickened. He had always sensed there was more to her story, something deep and untold. "What do you mean? What purpose?" Anya looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "You weren't just chosen by chance, Jack. You're important, in ways you don't yet understand." She looked up at him, her gaze piercing and full of emotion. "I had to leave before, to protect you. But now, The time has come for the truth to be known. You've always had a part to play in all of this, Jack. You just didn't know it. Jack felt a mix of fear and excitement build within him. His life, the quiet existence he had come to know, was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. "Anya, what's going on?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She smiled softly, the familiar warmth returning to her eyes. "The adventure we began together isn't over. It's only just begun." Jack nodded slowly, feeling the surge of hope he hadn't realized he had lost. Whatever was to come, he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead, ready to understand the mysteries of the universe alongside the woman who had brought him into it. And together, they would face whatever came next, united, stronger than before.